Mic check. 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some were fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
People love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
Welcome. You are entering the Stone Zone, and we've got a big, beautiful show for you tonight. I just returned from the Dominican Republic, where I went to cover the launch of Maria. That is an AI program very much like Elon Musk's Doge, designed to ferret out waste, fraud, and corruption in that country's government. Also to visit Carlos and Laura Gavidia. He's the impresario, put together the largest Trump boat parade in U.S. political history. I come back to a scene in American politics in which, generally speaking, politics is about the future, not the past, but we're learning a lot of things about our recent political past that are quite shocking. Not only do we learn the extent to which Joe Biden was incapacitated during his presidency, which many of us already believed, but now we learn that he has been diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer. Listen to President Donald Trump on this.
Given to everybody, but it's given just about, and it takes a long time to get to that situation. Now, I think, to get to a stage 9, I think that if you take a look, it's the same doctor that said that Joe was cognitively fine. There was nothing wrong with him. Well, he said, if it's the same doctor, he said there was nothing wrong there, and that's being proven to be a sad situation. And the auto pen is becoming a very big deal. The auto pen is becoming a big deal because it seems like that maybe was the president who ever operated the auto pen. But when they say that that was not good, they also, you have to look and you have to say that the test was not so good either. In other words, there are things going on that the public wasn't informed, and I think somebody's going to have to speak to his doctor, if it's the same, or even if it's two separate doctors. Why wasn't the cognitive ability, why wasn't that discussed? And I think the doctor said he's just fine, and it's turned out.
And here's the amazing thing. According to a White House statement, the president's diagnosis, the former president's diagnosis with cancer was discovered and announced late last week. But here's Joe Biden back in 2022 announcing that he had cancer.
And because it was a 4-lane highway that was accessible, my mother drove us, and rather than us be able to walk. And guess what? The first frost, you knew what was happening. You had to put on your windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer. And why can't, for the longest time, Delaware had the highest cancer rate in the nation.
Really kind of mind-boggling. Meanwhile, the president has raised a legitimate issue regarding the auto pen. Now, when President Donald Trump pardoned me after they tried to lynch me in a Soviet-style show trial, complete with a hateful anti-Trump judge, a deeply biased and corrupt jury forewoman, a rigged jury, and despite the fact that the judge withheld exculpatory evidence that proved that I knew about no Russian collusion or was involved in any WikiLeaks collaboration. At least I know President Donald Trump signed my pardon himself. It wasn't signed with an auto pen. Now, Congressman Tim Burchett of Tennessee has announced that there is evidence that those who were controlling the auto pen were taking bribes. This could explain why, in addition to a number of his political cronies like Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi and the Vindman brothers and others who he gave a preemptive pardon to, including Dr. Anthony Fauci, for some reason Joe Biden pardoned a large number of hardened criminals, murderers, and drug dealers who had expressed no remorse whatsoever. Considering that the established media has lied and covered up for Biden's mental incapacity for years, it seems unlikely to me, therefore, that this news of Biden's illness was a recent diagnosis. And then there's Jake Tapper. Jake Tapper rudely dismissed Lara Trump during the last campaign when she raised the very legitimate question of Joe Biden's cognitive decline. The fact that he would read the stage directions off the teleprompter, the fact that he constantly fell down, the fact that he couldn't seem to determine where or which way to exit the stage, that he would talk to people who didn't exist, the fact that during interviews his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, had to constantly bail him out because, let's be candid, he could rarely finish an entire sentence, never mind an entire thought. Listen to Jake Tapper shut Lara Trump down.
Every time he comes on stage or they turn to him, I'm like, Joe, can you get it out? Let's get the words out, Joe. You kind of feel bad for him.
How do you think it makes little kids with stutters feel when they see you make a comment like that?
First and foremost, I had no idea that Joe Biden ever suffered from a stutter. I think what we see on stage with Joe Biden, Jake, is very clearly a cognitive decline.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable
You have
to
no
watch somebody on stage
that's so amazing. It's so amazing to me that
try and figure out an answer.
A cognitive decline.
Well, when you're trying to tell me that what I was suggesting was
I think that you were mocking his stutter.
Yeah,
I think you were mocking his stutter, and I think you have absolutely no standing to diagnose somebody's cognitive decline. I would think that somebody in the Trump family would be more sensitive to people who do not have medical licenses diagnosing politicians from afar. Plenty of people have diagnosed your father from afar, and I'm sure it offends you. Your father-in-law from afar. I'm sure it offends you. You don't have any standing to say.
I'm not diagnosing him. What I'm saying, Jake,
you just talked
is
about
that
a cognitive decline.
That Joe Biden
I have one last
struggling
question for you, Laura. You can't
times on stage, and it's very concerning to a lot of people that this could be the leader of the free world.
Okay.
That is all I'm saying. I genuinely feel sorry for Joe Biden.
I appreciate it. I'm sure.
Now, amazingly, suddenly, Jake Tapper is out with a book in which he's trying to cash in on the fact that he claims that he missed the fact that Joe Biden was in mental and cognitive decline. By the way, Jake Tapper also said in an interview that he thought I'd be happy to go to jail. He has no credibility. He's not a journalist. He's a partisan talking head who has shredded any credibility that he had. Megyn Kelly, however, would not let him off the hook. Listen to this exchange.
I did ask Joe Biden to be transparent about his health records in an interview in 2020. I did ask him about the fact that voters thought that he was not transparent at all. No.
He promised you that he would be transparent about his health records, and then he wasn't. And when you sat with him again,
at all.
including 1 month after the Jackie Walorski thing, you didn't ask him about it. You didn't follow up on the fact that he was falling up the stairs, that he was losing his train of thought regularly, that he was slurring, that he was incomprehensible, that he was getting lost on the White House lawn. You sat right across from him and you asked none of that, notwithstanding the fact that he had promised you he would be fully transparent about his health issues.
That's true, but I did ask him about his age and the fact that the American people had concluded that even though he said whenever anybody brought up the subject of his age, watch me. And I said, yes, they're watching you and they are concerned that you were too old for this job.
You know as well as I do that there's a way of, you can say, hey, there's this poll on your age, or you could say, You just forgot that Jackie Walorski was dead. You asked where she was moments after watching a videotape tribute to her. You lowered the flags at the White House after she died. This happened 13 days before you sat with him. There is a way of pressing a man like that on the actual infirmities to bring it home to him and to the audience, and you didn't do it.
This is why I love Megyn Kelly. But in his newly released book, CNN's Jake Tapper has admitted, as he says, the real issue wasn't his age per se. It was the clear limitations of his abilities, which got worse throughout his presidency. What the public saw in his functioning was concerning. What was going on in private was worse. Well, that's certainly not what he said to Lara Trump. While Biden, on a day-in, day-out basis, could certainly make decisions and assert wisdom and act as president, I'm not sure that's true. There were several significant issues that complicated his presidency, according to Tapper. A limit to the hours in which he could reliably function, and an increasing number of moments when he just seemed to freeze up. Lost thought, forget the names of his own top aides, didn't recognize his own cabinet members, or momentarily not remember people he'd known for decades, not to mention impairments to his ability to communicate. Never mind the stutter, the fact that his comments would just trail off and he seemed incapable of completing a sentence. Now, these recently released audios of the special counsel, Robert Hur, who was questioning Joe Biden about his illegal retention of classified documents that as vice president and a U.S. senator, he had no legal authority whatsoever to retain, but his Justice Department charged President Donald Trump, who did, as a former president, have the authority to retain classified documents. Biden struggled to recall when his son died, when he left office as vice president, what year Donald Trump was elected, or why he had classified documents he should have had to begin with. That audio, which was recorded in 2023 during Biden's interviews with Robert Hur, demonstrate not only his failure to recall important facts, but also show him slurring and muttering. The White House, by the way, refused to release those recordings last year, demonstrating that Biden's mental incapacity was a serious issue, and they knew it would hamper his chances at re-election. After he melted down in his one and only debate with Donald Trump, the Democrats dumped him, and then the people who whine constantly about democracy and protecting democracy, they used a completely undemocratic process in which Kamala Harris was nominated for president, even though not a single Democrat primary or caucus voter voted for her. The Democrats and Joe Biden's White House even blasted the special counsel, claiming he was a Republican. He wasn't. Kamala Harris insisted after the debate that Joe Biden was sharp as a tack, her words. So while Biden was mentally out to lunch, the Democrats used an auto pen to forge executive orders in his name. Now, Congressman Tim Burchett of Tennessee has raised the question about the legality of those pardons and other executive orders. Last December, the Democrats forged Biden's signature, commuting the sentences of 1,500 convicts, including convicted murderers who had shown no remorse, as well as a number of drug dealers. Today, Burchett said that there's evidence that those who controlled the auto pen were taking bribes. That would describe why this has gone down. It was the largest single day of commutation and pardons in American history. Now the question raises over the appointment of Supreme Court Judge Ketanji Brown because, well, her appointment was signed with a auto pen as well. Now, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know how that could be challenged, but we'll talk about it when we come back to the Stone Zone in just a minute.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone. The Stone Zone.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
Now, get him his own. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
You're going to want to stay in the zone tonight because shortly we're going to be joined by attorney Larry Schnapf. He is an adjunct professor at New York Law School. He's also one of the leading advocates and experts regarding the John F. Kennedy assassination records and a major advocate for transparency. He's going to talk to us about today's hearings of the House Task Force on Declassification of the documents regarding the Kennedy assassination. So you don't want to miss that. I'm really not surprised that the Democrats and their handmaidens in the media have covered up Joe Biden's mental decline or his cancer. I mean, this is, after all, the same party that cooked up the Russian collusion hoax, the same party that twisted good people on both sides, which the president never said, into a racist smear, the same party that pushed the lie that Trump called those who gave their lives in the service of our country losers and suckers, the party that ran two bogus impeachments based on nothing, based on a conversation that never took place regarding Ukraine, the same people who said that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation right before the election when they knew it was in fact real, the same party that said the border was secure while more than 20 million people flooded in and, well, many children disappeared, the same folks who said that inflation was transitory while your grocery bill tripled, the same party that helped fund dangerous gain-of-function research in China and then lied about it, the same party that used COVID-19 as an excuse to crush small businesses, close churches, control speech, the same folks who said the vaccination stopped any possibility of infection. This is precisely the same party that called parents who were concerned about the curriculum being taught to their children, domestic terrorists, or those Catholics who chose to attend the Latin Mass. They weaponize the system against their opponents. They lie, they cheat, they rig. So it cannot be called surprising now. They knew that Joe Biden was not all there. I think it is elder abuse. There has been a massive cover-up. Yes, I as a Christian, I pray for Joe Biden, but I pray more for our country. And it is, as Oliver Hardy would say, a fine kettle of fish that we have. Again, I want you to stand by here in the zone because we're going to be joined by Larry Schnapf. He is someone I respect enormously in terms of his knowledge regarding the Kennedy assassination. From the very beginning, Larry Schnapf was, I think, one of the most authoritative voices on what we needed to find that the president's sweeping executive order did not cover. When we come back, we're going to talk about today's hearing, what new information we learned, and, well, what's still missing when it comes to the Kennedy assassination. Right back in the Stone Zone, so don't go away.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone. The Stone Zone. This is the Stone Zone. Now, get him his own. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
There was a hearing today on the U.S. House Task Force on Declassification of the documents pertaining to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, ably chaired by Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna. Shortly after JFK was murdered, the new president, Lyndon Johnson, actually resisted the idea of a national commission to investigate Kennedy's murder. He initially wanted a Texas state commission. He wanted Supreme Court Justice Tom Clark, who was a crony of his, to chair it. Listen to LBJ's conversation with J. Edgar Hoover.
Here's President Johnson talking to Hoover on Monday the 25th about how to proceed with the investigation.
Two things. Apparently some lawyer in justice is lobbying with the Post because that's where the suggestion came from for this presidential commission, which we think would be very bad, and put it right in the White House. And we can't be checking up on every shoot and scrape in the country, but they've gone to the Post now to get them an editorial, and the Post is calling up saying they're going to run an editorial if we don't do things.
President Johnson's plan was to have two simultaneous but coordinated investigations by Hoover's FBI and the Texas Attorney General, Wagner Carr. Johnson was absolutely against appointing a presidential committee. It's hard to not be taken aback by Johnson referring to the assassination of his predecessor just 3 days earlier as a shooting scrape.
We can't be checking up on every shoot and scrape in the country.
Johnson's point was that he didn't want to involve the White House in the investigation, but the way he talks about it is perhaps a window into what he really thought about President Kennedy.
I find that shocking. Larry Schnapf, welcome. Larry Schnapf is, as I say, an attorney, adjunct professor of New York Law School, one of the leading researchers and experts on the Kennedy assassination and the effort to learn more about it through greater transparency. Welcome to the Stone Zone.
Hi, Roger.
So, listen, it was your letter that first brought my attention to the fact that the president's order, while extremely well-intentioned, was probably actually too narrowly written. It really suggests that the National Archives release everything in the John F. Kennedy assassination records collection, but the federal government has a lot more documents than that, and there are many important things missing. Tell us about that, and then tell us about today's hearing.
Okay, well, the president's executive memo, I believe that they didn't realize what they were writing, because it did say that he didn't say the president made a finding that it was in the public interest, which is the terminology used in the statute, the JFK Records assassination statute, that it was the public interest that all of the records in the possession of the federal government be released. Now, the way the order was then written, it looked like he was referring to the records that were in the collection that is maintained by the National Archives. Back in the 90s, the Records Review Board basically got all the records from the agencies, and then they were transferred to the National Archives. But when the Review Board went out of business in 1998, their work wasn't done. Congress had just decided it wasn't going to fund them anymore, and there were outstanding search requests. So what I've been trying to do is to try to alert the people that were tasked by the executive order to comply with it, that we're not just talking about the records that are in the collection that are classified. We're talking about the records that were never put in the collection. So, for example, we have the Joanides files. George Joanides was a covert agent for the CIA. He was responsible for the Cuban exile group, the DRE. They're the ones that their representatives came in contact with Oswald in August of '63 when they had the street fight. And then they're the ones that came out with Oswald's biography within hours of the assassination. So they knew all about him, but those files were never turned over to the Review Board. The Review Board and the HSCA were misled. In fact, George Joanides, as we learned today, most people learned today for the first time, he was the one tasked by the CIA to work with the House Select Assassinations Committee, and when he got involved, suddenly the amount of records that were being given to the HSCA was slowed down, slow walked, redacted, and basically they did the same thing they did to the HSCA and to the review board that they did to the Warren Commission, which was to run the clock out on them. So there are other records that are also not in the collection. For example, Carlos Marcello allegedly confessed while in jail to his cellmate, who had been an undercover agent for the FBI, that he was behind the assassination, or at least maybe funded it. Those tapes are sealed. They've never been given the light of day. They're not in the collection. And we've asked the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to get those because she can get them unsealed. There are records that Robert Kennedy took from the White House in the hours after the assassination that were never turned over to the review board or the archives. They are supposedly going through declassification review, but it's been going on forever. The review board was trying to get them when they went out of business, and that process came to a halt. And they may have some really important stuff because these are files from the White House and that Bobby Kennedy was involved. There are also other records, like William Manchester had tape recordings of interviews with Jackie Kennedy and Robert Kennedy that were supposedly very explosive, particularly with Jackie Kennedy allegedly saying things about Lyndon Johnson. Those records, those tapes were sealed by a deed of gift from the Kennedy family, or at least a settlement, till 2067. The review board tried to get them released in the 90s, and Carolyn Kennedy was on the verge of doing it, and then her uncle Ted said, I don't think your mother would want to do it. And then they've been shut down. And NBC has some films that could possibly show that Oswald was on the front steps of the depository building at the time of the shooting. Not sure, but at least they could be studied. And then Walter Sheridan, who was a right-hand man of Bobby Kennedy, did his own investigation for Bobby. The review board asked for those records, and once again, he basically sent them over to NBC, and NBC has been withholding them all these years. The ARB actually sued to get them, but they went out of business. So there's a bunch of records out there that haven't been given to the National Archives yet. So we need not only just to release the records in the collection, but also those that are not in the collection yet. And despite what the Democratic witness today said, a lot of interesting and important stuff came out today.
That was a great compendium, and I learned almost everything you just said from you. And I was pleased to pass that on to Chairwoman Anna Paulina Luna. What do you make of the so-called Oliver Orville Nix film? Nix was an air-conditioned repairman filming with his own 8mm camera. There's some evidence that the Assassination Records Review Board viewed all or portions of his film. That film seems to be missing, no?
Yeah, so apparently he gave it over to the government. The HSCA supposedly had it. The House Select Assassinations Committee supposedly had it. They sent it out to get analyzed, and somewhere along the line it disappeared. And so the Nix family has tried to get it back. They're actually in litigation right now. They sued the government. The government made a motion to dismiss the lawsuit, and actually the Nix family has survived the motion to dismiss. Now this is for, obviously they would prefer to get the film back, but if they don't get the film back, they'll get damages for having lost it. But this is a very important film because it's the flip side of the Zapruder film. He was on the other side of Kennedy and closer, and well, at least they had a close up. It was on close up, but this film is equally as important as a Zapruder film because it's the flip side. So like when Zapruder is blocked by the traffic sign, well, Nix's film isn't blocked by that because they're on the opposite side. He's on the infield there. So and they just learned this past week apparently that when the Nix family negotiated some sort of release with the sixth floor, that the attorney representing the Nix family was also representing the Sixth Floor Museum. So there's a little conflict of interest there. But that's definitely a film that is really important, and it famously, at least allegedly, disappeared while it was in the hands somewhere between the laboratory that was analyzing it and the House Assassinations Committee.
When I wrote my book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, I actually got Arlen Specter, who was chief counsel to the Warren Commission, to admit that the Zapruder film was missing frames and that it was not as it appeared. Nick's film seems to be, because he was filming with a zoom lens, I think you're right, could answer the age-old question as to whether President Kennedy was shot from the front and the back. It's interesting to me that Paramount has recently come out with a documentary called What the Parkland Doctors Saw. Multiple doctors say in that stunning documentary that they saw wounds in JFK consistent with his being shot from the front and the back. But most importantly, two things: that several doctors say that the wound in his throat was not an exit wound, it was an entry wound from the front. And secondarily, that they were all threatened by the FBI not to discuss anything they had seen in the room where the autopsy was performed. To me, when you add that to the fact that we know definitively that Lee Harvey Oswald had been subject to a paraffin test by the Dallas Police Department, which did not indicate that he had any nitrate burns, no powder burns on his chest, his arms, his hands, or his cheeks, indicating that he did not fire a weapon that day. Perhaps this is why he says, it's very unlikely that they trot him out in public, and he says, what? I am a patsy. I didn't shoot anyone. That appears to be telling the truth. The Warren Commission, of course, telling us that Jack Ruby had no known association with organized crime, which is another fallacy. He was a button man for the mob in Chicago. He worked for Carlos Marcello in Cuba. Yet another one of the many falsehoods put forward in this continuing effort. Larry, have you seen anything in the disclosure so far that would indicate a larger conspiracy beyond Lee Harvey Oswald definitively?
Well, no one is going to be putting anything in writing that here's how we're going to kill the president. But we're getting like the records are like mosaics or pieces in a puzzle, and so as you get the puzzle together, it begins creating a picture. But I want to go back to what you said about the doctors, because today's testimony, Dr. Donald Teal Curtis testified today. He is a very important witness for two things. Number one, he was the third person in the room when the president was brought into the trauma room, and he did a cut down on the left leg. But he made some observations about what happened in the ER that demonstrates that when people see the Parkland movie or read the testimony of the Parkland doctors, the supporters of the Warren Commission say, well, they were too busy taking care of the president. They didn't get a chance to look at his wounds. What Dr. Curtis said today, and he told me this a couple of years ago, and I'm glad he was able to do it today, is that after Dr. Clark pronounced the president dead, Dr. Clark was a neurosurgeon. He was at the head of the gurney. He lifted up the president's head and then explained to the other senior doctors, the heads of the different departments, who were there against the wall. They weren't treating the doctor, but they weren't treating the president. He wanted to explain to them why he pronounced the president dead. He showed them the wound and described the wound. So the idea that the Parkland doctors made a mistake when they said the rear of the head was a blowout wound is just not true. So Dr. Curtis served that purpose today. He also goes into great detail about how Arlen Specter intimidated him and the other doctors. And if you have time, I can go through what they did.
When we come right back with Larry Schnapf, we're going to talk about that. I knew Arlen Specter. He could be very, very intimidating. We'll be right back.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone. the Stone Zone.
ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track, and ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. We're talking to Lawrence Schnapf. He's an attorney and one of the most prominent figures in the country in the ongoing efforts to declassify and release government documents relating to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Larry has sued the Biden administration and the National Archives several times because he believes that full disclosure of these documents is vital to understanding the events surrounding the assassination and to address the lingering questions and conspiracy theories. We're very happy to have him today. When we left off, you were talking about Arlen Specter, who I knew extremely well. I actually ran his campaign for the U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania, had many vigorous arguments over his cockamamie single bullet theory, logistically impossible, by the way, over cocktails. But you were talking about his intimidating the Parkland doctors. Lay it on us.
Okay. Well, first, before I get to that, one thing I want to mention Dr. Curtis also said was that his supervisor, Dr. Walker, when he saw him the Monday after the assassination, they talked about what they had seen in the ER. And Dr. Walker had told Dr. Curtis that he had saw a temple wound in the right temple, and that Dr. Ronald Jones had told him that another doctor, Dr. Lito Porto, had actually put his pinky into the wound. So there were several doctors who saw evidence of a frontal head wound, and that has been covered up and glossed over. Anyway, going to the Arlen Specter. So the first thing, when Earl Warren gets to decides how to conduct the investigation, he instructs all the lawyers that the preliminary interviews are to be not recorded. This was a way that they can basically find out who the good witnesses were and the bad witnesses were. And then once they find out, they can select the good ones, and then when they would go interview them, they would go off the record if the witness went off the reservation, and there are other tools and ways of intimidating the witnesses. One of them also was a perjury trap where the FBI, for example, would take testimony down on the 302 forms, and then they would alter the testimony and ask the person to sign the form and say, well, and they would object to the statement. I said, well, lying to a federal officer is a felony. So if this is the statement you gave. If you're telling us now the statement that's on paper is wrong, you're potentially going to be liable for felony. You know the drill, Roger.
Yes, indeed. Yes, unfortunately, yes. I certainly do. Well, as you know, Earl Warren, the Chief Justice, did not want to chair this commission. He was trying to get out of it until Lyndon Johnson implied to him that the Russians had been involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and that it was Earl Warren's duty to chair the commission in order to avoid World War III. Of course, We've seen no evidence whatsoever that the Russians or the Cubans, the Cuban government, was involved in the murder of John F. Kennedy. This is a modern murder mystery in which the American people are still extraordinarily, I think, intrigued. I give huge credit to Anna Paulina Luna, the Congresswoman from Florida, chairing this task force, and also to you, Larry. You've been helpful to the committee with your knowledge. I appreciate your joining us today in the Stone Zone. Many, many thanks to you for joining us. And for our listeners out there, until we meet again, and we're going to continue to cover this Kennedy assassination story because I think there are more twists and turns from the committee. Until we meet again, God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?